So within inventory, now we're going to focus on how do we cost the amount that we should recognize in cost of goods sold expense, and how do we value ending inventory. So we are going to use FIFO, LIFO, and average cost. But what I want to do is with the same example from your homework, this should be your problem number 27, I'm going to show you how to work each one of these. And each one is going to have a separate video. So we're going to start with FIFO. So what I want you to keep in mind is a couple of things. One, this problem indicates we use periodic inventory. Even if we use perpetual inventory, the process would still be the same. The fact that we're using periodic just means that we're just going to update it one time at the end of the accounting period. So we're going to update cost of goods sold expense and what we're going to call ending inventory once at the end of the period. Now remember, if we're using perpetual, it would be the same process. But this is just so we can go to the end and really just see how FIFO, LIFO, and average costs compare. So what I want you to keep in mind is that for any of these methods, this is really helping us calculate the cost of goods sold expense. So what method are we using to cost our inventory? So when we say we use FIFO, what we're really saying is that we are using a first in, first out method to calculate our cost of goods sold expense. And you're going to see how that works here in just a minute. So if we focus on FIFO inventory, I'm going to draw a chart down here. And I'm just going to call this FIFO inventory. And what FIFO again stands for is first in, first out. And when you think about this, I want you to keep in mind this has to do with the dates. The dates are key. So first in is the oldest cost in, means it's the first out to recognize in expense. Okay. So with that being said, what I want you to do is I want you to follow along with me on this data. So first of all, June 1st, this represents a beginning balance. June 30th represents an ending balance. And so draw just a little squiggly line here because we don't know what the value of that inventory is until we've worked through this calculation. And that's one of the items that we're going to find. So the cost of ending inventory. But we're going to start with cost of goods sold. And remember, this is expense. So as this company is thinking about their inventory balance, we have a beginning balance of 110, and then we have our purchases of 360 and 190. And these numbers are my units, okay? So we're just looking at inventory numbers or units right here. We'll get to the cost here in just a minute. Now, if I draw a line here, I've got my ending balance, my normal asset balances of 192. So I started with 110. I add purchases of 360 and 190. This is called my cost of goods available for sale or available to be sold. And that's going to be important as we think through kind of just what's happened. Okay. Remember, these are all of our positives. And we, in order to get to 192 units left, that means we had to have sold some. So if I back into this and take my beginning balance plus my purchases minus my ending balance, I know that I've sold 468 units. Now, keep in mind, that's going to be the same for FIFO, LIFO, and average cost because the data is all the same. Okay, this is just our data of what happened. So those numbers aren't going to change. Keep that in mind. But now let's focus on this inventory valuation process. So first in, first out says, let's recognize the cost of goods sold and that expense based on first in, first out. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and I'm going to squeeze in a little section called sold because I want you to see the numbers that we sold. First in, first out says take the oldest first. So of the 468 that I sold, 110 is going to come out of my first bucket, if you will. So I'm going to cost out 110 units at $5 each. And I already know that total cost, $5.50. It's given to me right up here. Okay, it's right up here. Now, if I sold 110 of those 468 out of the $5 bucket, how many are left to come out of the $6 bucket? Well, I need 358, which means I only have 2 left. So 358 at $6. And if I multiply that, I get 2,148. Now, that equals my 110 plus 358. That equals my 468 units sold. Okay. And so if I add those together, guess what I get? 2,698, which is my cost of goods sold expense. Okay. That's how we calculate cost of goods sold expense under the FIFO method. Now let's look, because we also have to calculate the cost of the ending inventory. Well, if I look at that, I'm really trying to say, well, how much does this 192 cost? Well, I have none of these buckets left, but I have a $6 and a $7 bucket left. But if I look at my units, look how many I have. I have 2 left at $6 and 190 left at 7. And so when I think about what makes up that 192, I have 2 at $6, which equals a whopping 12 bucks. And then I've got 190 at 7, which equals 1,330. And if I add those together, I get my 1,342. And that is my cost of ending inventory. So something to keep in mind is that under FIFO, the oldest costs are recognized as expense and the newer costs are left in the cost of the ending inventory. And that's how we work FIFO. We're going to move on to the next video, and the next video is going to walk through the LIFO calculation.